Hello and welcome to Migrating Your File Server to SharePoint. What to consider before making the move. My name is Nathan Austin. I'll be presenting today, and I'm joined behind the scenes by Stephanie Kingsley, both of us from Mytech. And this is a significant, probably one of the most complicated sessions that we're going to present relative to all the work that really needs to go into it to make it an effective transition. What we have found is there are a lot of folks who have moved their applications to the cloud, whether it be a software as a service, using Microsoft 365, and the last piece of their environment, their infrastructure that still resides inside of their physical offices is their file server. And so that's a common challenge that we're seeing out in the world today in the small business community is how do I move my file server to SharePoint? And the biggest lesson at a high level that I always like to talk about, and we'll get into these details later, but just as an overview, is that you don't typically just want to copy and paste because there's different capabilities of SharePoint than what your file server presents. And that's really what we're going to be covering today. So to move it forward here, know before you go. Excuse me, I like to title that. So first of all, help plan. This is the help plan for thinking through a SharePoint migration, moving from a file server to SharePoint. That's the goal, is to help you plan. I'm not going to show you how to migrate. This is to help you think through the process so you can prepare for a successful migration. We're going to compare and contrast the key features and functions that are different between a file server and SharePoint, and I'll walk you through some of those. And that's going to be the key part of the demonstration, which is actually to show you what those differences are, not just say that they exist. Finally, towards the end, we actually have a couple summary slides that if you're gonna, this is recorded and will be available after the session, but if, I always like to put a couple summaries that if you're gonna take a snapshot of a couple slides, we provided some summary items there for you as far as some steps to walk through that'll help you down your path. And of course, we're always here to help. So moving along. Before we get going, 1 minute about Mytech. We are a small and medium-sized business and IT consulting firm. We have been in business now for 20 years, and over those 20 years, we've learned a lot about technology and the different pieces that work together and fit together. We've summarized that as our proven IT strategy. We've learned how to put those things together in collaboration with our clients that can achieve proven and consistent results. And so that's what oftentimes what our clients come to us for, is that guidance to help them implement a proven IT strategy that can deliver results. We understand that not every business problem is a technology problem, and so we are definitely not trying to solve everything, but where a business problem can be solved by technology, that's what we're trying to take off your plate, at least remove some of those IT challenges. Our team their goal and their coach to make IT easy for you, our client. We don't always achieve it. We're not a perfect organization, but we do like to make IT easy for our clients. And if we feel like we're not doing that, or you have any suggestions on how we can do a better job of that, we'd love to hear them. So finally, when you put all that together, we realize that by putting the proven strategy together, making IT easy, we're just hoping to be able to allow you to spend more time working and serving your customers and being more adaptable to the other business challenges and issues that we all face out in the community at large. And again, putting that all together, finally, our clients achieve 4 times more value and productivity from their IT investments. So that doesn't come without work from everybody in collaboration. So if you'd like to learn more about that or like to talk to us about it, give us a shout. We'd love to chat. Otherwise, let's dig in to what to prepare for thinking through SharePoint. All right, from file servers to SharePoint. So we're going to compare and contrast key features and functions. Now, this isn't an exhaustive list of every single feature and function that exists, but I do want to provide a summary of some of the key things that we see are the low-hanging fruit, if you will, or the things that are the highest probability where you might experience them or have an impact as through your thought process and migration process. So I'm going to touch on each one of these individually really quick, and then we'll get into the demonstration. So first of all, when you talk about the standard access, it's different. Many of you, for the last 20 plus years, we've typically been used to a file explorer, that little folder icon that opens up a window from which you can get into your folders and subfolders, etc., map, network drives, things like that. Well, SharePoint's a web browser, so that's different. It functions differently, it feels differently, there's slight click differences. So that's important just to note and be aware of. Remote access, one of the things that has really pushed a lot of people to this technology in recent months is because we've all been working remotely. And it doesn't mean you can't access a file server remotely, but you have to use a VPN connection typically to do that, versus whereas with SharePoint, you can use a browser, and or if you're syncing with OneDrive, you can actually access it from your local machine without having to use a VPN or virtual private network. So those, again, a couple of the slight differences between standard access and remote access. And now when you get into some other key differences is that historically for your file server, you have mapped network drives, and those drives are typically based on maybe your company or your department. And so there's a similar kind of cross functionality or correlation between SharePoint, where you actually have Teams sites or just SharePoint sites, where you might have an all company site and then you might have different department sites. So if you think about correlation there between what your map network drives are versus what you may be seeing in Teams, there's a strong correlation in how you might design and think through your file server to SharePoint migration. Now we're going to get into key differences that are completely different with regard to what SharePoint can do versus file servers. So for instance, in SharePoint, one of the things being a browser-based technology, there's a finite limit of characters that can be in the browser window, right? If you click in the browser window at the top and you see this long string of characters, there's a finite number. We'll post what that is afterwards, but I don't know off the top of my head what that character limit is. But because of that, instead of using folders and subfolders, so for instance, in most of your file servers, you have kind of a department folder and then a subfolder and maybe a subfolder and a subfolder and a subfolder. SharePoint works differently, and it actually creates a little bit more flexibility and ease of access, but you have to think through it differently. And so we're going to talk about that as far as how you can use tags and metadata in SharePoint instead of like typical file server subfolders and multiple subfolders. The other thing, once you've set up some metadata and tags and filters, you can actually create custom views. You can filter and sort and search by all those different criteria. Whereas you can't really do that. You can search in a file server, but you have limited search capabilities based on compared to what you can do in SharePoint. So there's some advantages there as well if you've actually used and have built that structure. Again, we'll walk you through that. The next couple are really around alerts, notifications, workflow, and automation. You can do a lot of that within SharePoint, and there's hardly any of that you can do in your file server. So, but that's going to be a little bit more advanced. We're not going to spend as much time on it, but as you iterate and improve the way you're using SharePoint, that's definitely some of the more advanced capabilities that I would recommend checking out. The last one is really collaboration and version control. One of the main differences between SharePoint and Teams versus your file server is that multi-user editing. You can have multiple people working on collaborating, editing, giving feedback in a document at the same time. And it comes along with that the ability for version control and being able to look back at previous versions and then restore previous versions as an individual user versus having to do save as, and you get multiple iterations of the document, and having to go to your IT team in order to be able to restore a previous version of a file in case you overwrote it. So there's definitely some advantages to SharePoint, you know, and we'll talk about some of the more advanced things at the end, but we're going to hit on, from a demonstration perspective, some of those key differences that are really the low-hanging fruit to walk you through how to your thought process and the mental exercises, so to speak, to go through in order to prepare yourself and your organization for a file server to SharePoint migration. A couple pieces of trivia though before we go there. One, some applications are not yet ready to be able to go away from a file server just by the nature of the way they work. A couple examples of those are things like CAD or design, where they're dealing with large files. Being able to move them to SharePoint, that the software doesn't engage or doesn't connect with SharePoint, at least not all of them. I know that some of them I think are evolving to be able to adapt to this new way of operating, but also from a performance perspective, a lot of CAD programs and design programs that doesn't work the greatest in SharePoint. Quickbooks is another one. Some accounting programs like Sage 50, I think, which is the old Peachtree, or the new version of what was Peachtree. Doesn't really work well with SharePoint. You might consider going to QuickBooks Online if you're trying to move QuickBooks to the cloud versus a file server. So that's just something to be aware of. Also, we'll show you how OneDrive allows you to have similar functionality basically to what you're used to as a file server that can help with transitioning and helping your team adopt moving to SharePoint versus a file server. Okay, so enough talking. Let's start demonstrating. So we are going to go to we're going to demonstrate some of these features and functions. And so I'm going to start by pulling up kind of examples of what you're probably used to from historical map drives. So I'm actually just pulling in a window. This is your typical file explorer that when you drill down on your PC, you might have your key map drive. So this is our Mytech map drive, and we have these different folder structures that exist here. And so you think about, the all company folder, you've got culture, finance, HR, marketing, sales, service, etc. So you've got these different structures that might exist from a standpoint of your file structure. But then if you pull up teams and you think about, well, okay, here's a team structure. And when I map, I'm going to overlay some of this onto there. So I'm going to pull this off to the side here. So you can see how you've got company. Well, we've got an all company site here. We've got marketing here. We've got a marketing team here. We've got a sales team. We have a sales team here. Service, I guess, would be operations for us. So we have an operations team. Finance is here. We've got a finance team. So you get the idea that the map network drives are very similar from a permissioning and group structure perspective that you're used to from the historical legacy way of using a file server to how you might consider using teams. However, there are a couple differences that you might consider, and so when you actually have the team sites, in fact, I'll also pull up here a view. I'm going to pull up office.com, and I'm going to actually pull up SharePoint. And SharePoint, this is going to show you the different sites. So when I was pulling up the all company team, right, so that actually pulls up, it has its own SharePoint site. The finance team has its own SharePoint site. That's one of the key differences between a file server and the way SharePoint and Teams work together, is that instead of a unique map network drive, you're basically building out a unique SharePoint site that is connected to these respective teams. So that's an important thing to understand as far as thinking through how you might create your teams structure to marry with or align with a SharePoint structure as you move your files from a file server to SharePoint. So that's just a high level kind of correlation. But one of the things I really like about Teams and the way you can create basically shortcuts, we've been able to do shortcuts for a long time with your file server. But I'm going to click on the operations team here, and I'm going to go to the files tab here up at the top. Okay. And I'll give you an illustration of what I mean is that I have already created, if you can see these folders here at the top are actually links. What I've done is I basically went in here and I said, I added cloud storage, and I said, I want to add something from my SharePoint site. So I clicked SharePoint, and I wanted to choose something from, like, let's say I wanted to link something from our all company site, which I've already done over here, but just for the sake of this illustration, you come in here and you click that, next, and I can choose, I'm going to add culture content. So I'm going to just click on here, click culture content, next, and I'm going to add the folder. So now what I've been able to do is I have the culture folder that exists on the all company site, but I've linked it here inside of the operations team. The reason why I like to illustrate that is because if I live in the operations team for the most part, if my role does that, instead of having to, if these are documents that I might frequently or infrequently access, instead of having to navigate outside of my team to be able to access them, I can just link them here inside of my team site. So that's one of the functions that you can do too when you're thinking about designing your team structure, your permissions, and your SharePoint structure, because they all work really well together. But this is also a way in which you can, even though you're building an operations team distinct from the all company team, you can still link relevant content inside of that file structure. So that's one of the things I like to illustrate as far as thinking through that process. Okay, another one here? All right, so now I want to show you the operations team here is inside of the operations team. Here's one of the capabilities that exist that's completely different in a file server, in a SharePoint, excuse me, than your file server. So notice you've got the common columns that you're used to seeing here at the top. But one of the things, I've created a custom column here of Microsoft 365 topics. These are all the different PowerPoint presentations that we've been doing over the last few months. And one of the things that I did is I created a custom column that basically allowed me, and I'm going to show you, I'm going to go to column settings and edit. So you'll see I just, so it'll show you over here on the side the type of thing. So I named the column Microsoft 365 topics. I did a drop down choice. I defined the choices that I wanted. Does it relate to Teams or SharePoint or Planner or To Do? Defined all of that. And then down here, I can choose if there's a default value, which I've selected none. I could choose any one of these as a default if I want. And under more options here, there's a couple things that I did is that I wanted to allow multiple choices, and I didn't want to require that this field has content. So just so you know, so I custom built this. It only took me a couple minutes to actually do it. But the advantage of this versus a file server, and I'm going to hit cancel here because I didn't change anything, is that I can basically come in here and choose, like, so for instance, I'm going to come in here, unclick the white space. I'm going to go up to quick edit here. And that allows me to then click in here. So team leaders, help ensure, I don't have a topic for that one, although this is probably related to Teams. So let's say I wanted to choose, this is related to Teams, and this is also related to really To Do and Planner, I think, are some of the things that this one's related to, which it is. And then I'm going to click out of that. So now what I've been able to do is identify this document with metadata that says it's associated with Teams, To Do, and Planner, which allows me to now sort and filter and create custom views and or search based on this content versus just the title of the PowerPoint itself. Now, one of the advantages here is, notice I selected multiple items. So historically, when you have a file server, one of the things that you might do is you might have a subfolder that is Teams, or a subfolder that is To Do, or a subfolder that is Planner. Well, so which folder would I put this document into? I would have to potentially choose which one, even though it might apply to multiple. So instead of creating a bunch of subfolders, you can actually apply metadata. So that's one of the things to think through as far as choosing and being able to filter and sort. So I'm going to exit that. That saves it, basically just hitting exit at the top. And again, it's really as simple as basically going to add column, choosing the kind of column you want to create, and then it only takes a minute or two to actually build that out. Okay, so one of the things that I do want to illustrate, though, relative to the metadata, actually the ability to sort. So what I did is I sorted, so I can come in here on any one of the columns. I can sort older to newer, newer to older, etc. Group by modified date. If multiple people edited, I could group by, modified by, which I didn't do. But let's say up here I want to filter. So it's going to pull up a filter option. So again, I just clicked basically right here, and I chose filter. Here, I'll X out of that and I'll show you that again. So I'm going to click here, and I'm going to choose filter by. Okay, click on that. And now I only want to see the presentations or the PowerPoint documents that are related to Teams. So I'm just going to come up here and hit Teams. I'm going to hit apply. And now it basically executed almost a search for anything that's applied to Teams, because I've identified all of these presentations applied to Teams. So this is a filter that's applied, and you can also get to that by just clicking up this document, this little icon here. It's a filters page, and that allows you to filter by different capabilities, document type, etc. And then the other thing that I can do that I think is nice, so let's say this is a default view that I want because of how I operate, how I work with this infrastructure or this content. This is the view that I want to default. So I can actually come up here by clicking on this. It'll get rid of this screen. I'm going to click up here on the all documents, this little drop down right here. And notice what I could do is I can save view as. I can edit the view, of course, but I'm going to save this view. And I'm just going to save it as Teams, because that's what I selected as a filter. And I can make it a public view, which then makes it available for other people to be able to use. Click Save. So now that's the Teams view. And I believe, yes, once you've done that and you click on that same drop down again, you can now set this current view as default. So that's something that I can come in here and do. I'm just going to select that. So now anytime I come to the operations team page, it's gonna set this teams view as my default, which is going to automatically apply this filter to my my view. And if I want to undo that, I can just come in here on the filters, and I can eliminate the filters or change the filters, or I can come in here and just come back to all documents, which is the other view that I had specified. And that eliminates that. So really easy to do, but this is one of those tips is if you're rolling some of this stuff out, you might consider helping your team learn how to do so they can help them navigate through that a lot faster. Okay, the other little nuance that I want to talk about with regard to document libraries. So these columns are customizable, but it's at the document library level. So what I mean by that is this navigation bar, this documents, notice this column exists here, but there's no content here. As I drill down into general, this column exists, there is content. If I click into this one, another subfolder, the column still exists. So this column is going to exist through this entire document library. So one of the ways to get around that, if the custom columns that you want, you don't necessarily want across every piece of content, you can actually, and I'll illustrate that I've got the all company pulled up. I actually created another document library, and I called that one culture content, which is the one that I added to the operations team site. So click on this here, and you can see I don't have any documents in here, but this is the, I can customize this content here, and I actually did customize a location tab. So for instance, I'll hit edit here so you can see what I did. I basically said I can identify stuff by location. So like Colorado branch, Minnesota, or Arizona. We don't have an Arizona branch, but you get the idea. So I could choose that I want to identify documentation at the all company level based on the location. And that could be different sites that you may have in your organization as an example. Now notice this column is here, but it does not exist in the other document library. So I'm going to click on the other document library up here, and that location column will not show up, because I didn't create it here, but I did create a different one called core process. So for example, I'm going to come in here and click edit again just to show you what the options are. I chose core process, and I said, well, is it a marketing process, sales, operations, or finance? That might be a more applicable filter or column that you might set at the all company level, so that people that are in marketing or sales or finance can maybe filter by those tags or multiple tags and customize their view. So the key point that I wanted to illustrate here is that, again, the columns are built at the document library level. And if you want to create a new document library, you just click on the home of any given site here. And then you'll click on new. And when you click on new, you have the option for document library, and that's how you create a new document library. And just know that the document libraries that exist, I created the documents, one is the default, and then the culture content is the one I created, and the custom columns that you can create, or the metadata or the tags, are built to the document library. So just think about that as you're going through the process. And you can add a bunch of different columns for a bunch of different filters, long descriptions. Again, if you look at click on this, single line, multiple line, number, you could have it be a number. You could have people put their own data in, or you could restrict it to only the data you specify as drop downs or radio buttons. All that kind of stuff you can build as columns. All of that becomes filterable. You can sort, create custom views, etc., and tag the information. And all of that exists so that doesn't exist so you don't have to use subfolders, but you can use those instead of a plethora of subfolders. It doesn't mean that you never will use subfolders. It just means that you can think through it differently as it applies to your content. Okay, showed that. All right, here's the other thing. Then I'm going to go back to the operations team. I have this up here. And in the past, we've talked about alerting and workflow notifications. So there's some things up here at the top. I'm going to go back to the general folder here that you can do. So for instance, I'm going to select this document because it creates a slightly different feature set. When I click on automate up here, I can request a sign off. So you can build some workflow and approval notifications into SharePoint. You couldn't really do this inside of a file share, other than maybe sending an email saying please approve. But this builds workflow and notification back and forth, which is a cool capability. I'm going to unselect that. The other one that you can do is if you click the little breadcrumbs up here, it gives you the option to alert. This is an individual setting. What I mean by that is I can choose, as my login, my user account, can choose what alerts I want across SharePoint. So that's something that's important because I can choose that or not choose that as a user. However, one of the things under automate is you can actually build some Power Automates and create flows where, let's say if one of these documents gets updated, I actually, and this is a new document template for our organization, I can build a workflow that I specify as the owner or the author, the owner of that site, if you will, or the department manager, etc., that I want to build a workflow so that whenever there's a change to a document that's a template, I want to notify anyone who with whom that applies, right? So the sales team or the operations team, etc. So you can build some automated workflow. Again, that's set at the say owner of the site level versus the alerts are set at an individual level. So these are individual things you can do to manage those capabilities as an organization. The last thing I'm going to show that I think is interesting relative to templates and document management, I'm going to pull up Teams, is that there's some advanced things here where we actually have shown as far as like a change advisory board. You know, one of the biggest challenges we've also heard from our clients as we've gone through training over the last couple of years with them in lots of sessions every month, and it comes up every single session, is how do I distinguish between in production document templates that I want my team to use every time they do a new workflow or a work order or PO or whatever that is, versus the documents from which you iterate, the source files, the master documents that you want to keep protected because you're not trying to iterate to the production documents. You want to make changes on one side, approve those changes, and move those into production. So one of the things that we've done, and we actually did a session on this that goes way deeper into this topic, but I wanted to show that is a cool thing you can do with SharePoint, is you can build a change. What we did is a change advisory board that uses ITIL methodology, and we built different channels for the different people to collaborate on documents. These are our in progress documents. I'm going to actually pull up an example. Client, I think I have files in client engagement. So I'm going to go up here to files. So here, these are the iterative documents from which I can make changes as that's loading. So I can make changes and update these documents here, but they're not going into production. We can kick off workflow for sign-offs and approvals, as I just mentioned. And then once we actually say, all right, this is ready to go, we can actually, these are sales documents because they're client engagement, we can actually then move them up into the sales team to be production templates. And then we can build workflow to notify the team, hey, the new template's available. Please stop using the old template and start using this new one. And here are the things that we changed. So there's some cool communication and automation capabilities you can build into the permissioning. The other thing that you might encounter from a change management perspective is that instead of a global change management across your whole organization, there might just be some change management that you want to do inside of the team. So you can also build out change management by basically creating a private team. Notice this little lock here. You can have a private team where, because comp plans are a little bit more confidential and sensitive, where you can collaborate inside of that team, but you basically have specified the subset of people that are part of the operations team that can collaborate, and before you make it production or put any offer letters or out to anybody in the organization. So there's a couple different ways to be able to do document change management. This all integrates with SharePoint as well, but it's things to think about that also are some advanced capabilities once you've started your path down moving from file serving to SharePoint. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the slides here and a couple summary slides. So here are the steps that I would encourage you to follow if you're thinking about going down this path. First of all, get your right team together. Get some of the power users in the organization that really enjoy going through these mental exercises and thinking through these thought processes. They will enjoy this way more than those who don't enjoy that process. Who are your stakeholders and power users? Think through the core structure first. So mapping those map network drives that you've been using to maybe team sites or SharePoint sites or both. Okay. Step two, the substructure in the organization, meaning does this content warrant a subfolder, or should this content use metadata or the column tags that I was mentioning earlier? It might be easier to be able to use the metadata that you can search and filter by versus subfolders. But in some instances, another subfolders might make sense, and or you might consider different document libraries too, depending on the different sites. So those are just some things to think through. Step three, if you have time, and I would encourage you, allowing plenty of time to go through this process, consider getting a pilot team or maybe a pilot department, or where you've got a power user that might be the department head that could really help you work through the idiosyncrasies, the kinks, the nuances, etc., of building the structure, making the migration happen, training the team, getting feedback from the team of what worked well, what they didn't like, so that you can iterate before you roll it out to the whole organization. So if you then are able to go to the organization, you might have to skip step 3 depending on your timing, but if you can do step 3, I'd highly recommend it. Then you might skip from step 2 to step 4 if you're not able to do a pilot. But you know, basically build the structure and train your team preliminarily. I would recommend that, to walk them through some things before they have to use it operationally. Migrate the data. You might need help with that. In fact, you probably will need help with that if you're doing a whole-scale migration from your file server. That's where companies like us can help. Your internal IT might be able to help, but that's a trickier part. But that's, as you can see, that's a very minor subset of the overall process. Migrate your data, and then what I would encourage is helping your team set up OneDrive or default views. And I forgot to illustrate OneDrive, so I'm going to do that really quick. I'm going to pull up this file structure and notice I've got multiple OneDrives up here. So I've got my Mytech OneDrive. So this is my user account, kind of like my Documents. If you were, you know, from a file server My Documents perspective, that's basically what this OneDrive is. And then I've got the little icon up here. It's a building icon. This is actually syncing documents from our corporate SharePoint site. So all you have to do, if you have a team of people that they need all sales team documents or the change advisory board documents, you only have to help them sync this one time. Once you've done that, it will show up on their computer for them to be able to see and view, and it'll allow them to be able to access those documents and those files in a similar way to which they were used to in the File Explorer through their map network drives. So that's one of the things I wanted to illustrate. So that's what I would recommend as you're going through stage 4, is helping your team set up OneDrive. You only have to do it once, or maybe help them customize that view. So you walk them through it so they get a little bit more comfortable with it and they won't feel as embarrassed about doing it, to get that going. I would reinforce it in company meetings or department meetings, through your team meetings or weekly or monthly team meetings, depending on your frequency. And then I would recommend follow-up training, because people don't retain 100% of what you train them on. So follow up, and also use that as an opportunity to elicit feedback for gaps and or opportunities for improvement. So that's where I would start, is those kind of core steps. That might take you several months or several quarters to be able to implement, depending on the amount of data and the number of teams and the complexity of your environment. But that's a good start from an overview perspective. Now, as a bonus, I wanted to provide some advanced and continual improvement things to consider, because I wouldn't try and complicate the initial migration with these things, but it's definitely something that be aware that they're there, and think about implementing them as they apply over time. So for instance, use Teams in SharePoint for document change management, as I illustrated. You can build a change advisory team or a private channel, and then really build the collaborative structure to be able to iterate, and workflows to approve, document collaboration for multi-user editing, and then kind of a process to then move those iterative documents into production as a template, and then the associative notifications, because that then flows into helping your team with alerts, notifications, and workflow automation. Help your team figure out how to manage those alerts. Maybe configure global notifications when you really want to make sure the team knows that a template has been changed, and you don't want them to, you don't want to have to rely on everyone setting up an individual alert for them to get that notification. Again, and build workflow for things like approvals or document changes that are critical. So that's some bonus content. That's more advanced. It will require a little bit more effort to build that out. But if you're just starting your journey, I'd recommend just those first 4 core steps to help you go through that journey. And that's really all I have today. Again, this is a lot of effort and work and thought process. The majority of the work here is your mental energy of walking through those thought processes and thinking about how that structure is different. And then migrating and actually training your team. Migration is the easy part. That's actually not that complicated. And then there's a longer tail of training, adoption, and continual improvement and iteration. So just to set your expectation about what you're in for if you're going down this path. So for those of you who have to drop off, thank you so much for taking your time today. The recording will be available afterwards. There's also some surveys. I'd please recommend attending those. The last thing I'll mention too is that for those of you, remember when I said bringing your power users together? We are conducting monthly power user groups. I would encourage those folks in your mind that you're thinking of when I was talking about that. we would encourage you to invite them. They're free. We do them once a month. It's to really help them understand this structure so that they can do a better job of helping guide internally your organization and being the champion, if you will, of making these things happen and driving adoption and training internally for your team. So encourage those. We have sessions built out into August, so I look forward to seeing you on other events in the future. For those of you who can stick around, we'll open up for questions. So thanks for attending. And Stephanie, let's open it up. Any questions that we've got that we